Well, I recently had someone ask me about this Bible that we're looking at here, the KJVER Bible, which stands for the King James Version Easy Read Format. So the ER is for Easy Read. When I look at it and I see KJVER, it kind of looks like KJVER, like it's more KJV than the original KJV. But that's not what it's referring to. It is a King James Version Easy Read. And this is a Sword Study Bible, so it is actually a study Bible. Someone asked me about it, and I wrote to the publisher of this, and they kindly sent me a copy for me to review. So I'm happy to take a look at this today. From what I could tell from the copyright page, these first were produced in 2001, it looks like. So they've been around for quite a while, but this is the first time I've ever seen one. So this gives a little overview. It's the personal size large print. This does contain a presentation page, contents, an introduction, got the books of the Bible, both in their order that they're found in the Bible as well as their alphabetical order, basic outline of Old Testament history, the names and attributes of God, definitions of biblical terms rarely used today. So this already shows you a little bit of how they help aid you in reading the King James. They give you definitions, and these are terms that you might hear today but not as commonly, or in some cases you've never heard these words, so they're giving you some definitions here to help you out. Then we have word changes. So these are words, from what I can tell, that maybe are archaic or not used, or they're used differently, and they give you definitions that are more accurate for words that we use today. Getting into the Old Testament, you'll see that the beginning of the book here, the beginning of Genesis, has an outline, and you will see outlines for each of the books, as well as a little introduction. Now, you will immediately see what makes this Bible very unique in a few different ways. It is a, I think, 11-point font, double column, verse by verse format. That's pretty normal. It does have this little overview of the title of the book here, Beginnings of the Universe of God's People. So that's what Genesis is about. But what is so unique is you have some underlined words. And so God is underlined, and it gives you a definition here. The word there is Elohim. So there are other words like divided, and the definition for that is separated. So they're just trying to define some words that might be a little harder for some readers to understand, or just to clarify meaning. Firmament is another one. It says their definition would be expanse. But you'll also notice something very interesting is that there are red letters. Now, for those of you who do not like red letter Bibles, I've got bad news. This is not only red letter in the New Testament for the words of Christ, you're seeing here for the direct words from God, you will actually have red letters in the Old Testament as well. So, sorry about that if you don't like red letter. For those of you who like red letter, this is your dream come true. There is red letter galore. So you'll also notice on the side here that there are letters, numbers, and we're going to show you there the study helps that correlate with those. Those have to do with chain references that are in this Bible. So let's look at that. So the chain reference section of this Bible is divided into these categories. This is kind of a Bible study guide. God, plan, and man. So they're dividing different topics that are found in the Bible into these three categories. God, and here are the codes that go along with each of the topics. They have the letter codes there. Plan, code, title, and then man. And then you will see that the topics are listed out here. And what they do is they give you the reference, the book, the chapter, the verse, and the page. So there's a lot of references that are a lot of topics that are covered here in this section, and this is actually found between the Old and the New Testament. You have this whole chain reference section of Bible study helps. And so when you're reading, if you find a certain code here, you can then go to the page that it tells you, and you can read about that and find the reference. So for example, here we have G 411, and that goes down here. Now at the bottom there's the number, which is a page number, which tells you the next place that you're going to find that chain reference. So this topic here, G4H, you're going to find the next reference in that topic on page 1355. So it's a unique way of linking references together, but again, all of those chains are actually found right here. So for example, faith, that topic, all the references that correlate with faith are found here. But as you're reading through, you can also see the numbers, the page numbers of the next chain reference that you're going to. There is an article here between the Old and the New Testament on the time period between the Testaments by William Lane. So that's just an overview of historically what's happening between the Old Testament and the New Testament. Another thing I should mention is that this Bible not only defines certain words, but you will notice that it also modernizes some of the Old English. So you're not going to get words like thee or thou or hath. They're going to modernize those. So let me give you an example of that. In Psalm 18 verse 6, it says, "With the pure you will show yourself pure, and with the froward you will show yourself froward." So they've actually modernized that. Instead of saying with the pure thou wilt show thyself pure, they just changed those words to you will show yourself pure. They did capitalize the pronouns for deity, so much like the New King James and how they did that. But instead of completely changing it and putting a different word for froward, they just underline that, and they define it down here as twisted. So it is the King James Version. It doesn't have any textual notes to talk about maybe different textual bases like you get in the New King James. It's really just a King James Version, and no footnotes or anything of that nature. Another interesting feature is that when you have an Old Testament quote given in the New Testament that have to do with messianic prophecies, they will actually outline those and put the reference here after the verse. So this verse here is circled, a virgin shall be with child, shall bring forth a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel. That's from Isaiah 7:14, and you will see that in the New Testament for messianic prophecies. So this is a really nice study tool, and if you love the King James, or you want to you want to get more familiar with the King James, this is a good way to do that. When we get to the end of the Bible, we actually have a whole section now called a Treasury of Biblical Information. So again, just adding to the study materials that are in this Bible, there's hundreds of pages here at the end. Now, I love that this Bible is in about 11-point font. I think that's great, but unfortunately the resources in the back, at least on this Bible, are in quite a small font. So if there's one improvement that they could make, if you need a big font, this part of the Bible is great. This part of the Bible is not as good. So that would be something, it would be good if they could get that font to be a little bit bigger. What you'll see in these helps are various articles, and I'm not going to show you all of them, but just to give you a taste of what's here. We have a creationist defense of the King James Bible. So this is an article by Henry Morris, and so some of you know he's a creationist with, I believe, the Institute for Creation Research. There are also helps in here by people like Ken Ham and Ray Comfort. So the way I would describe the helps in the back are they would be very much of a more fundamentalist leaning nature. Not necessarily the most hardcore fundamentalists, but still people that would be in that category. There is a section here on witnessing, personal witnessing. So a lot of different articles that are very helpful, and then finally, after you have all those different articles and helps, you have a topical concordance, and this is about 300 pages almost of topics. And at the very end of the Bible, we have the maps. Now, the maps are fine. There's some really interesting stuff here with the Middle East and the flood, the origins of nations. But what I find fascinating is, though there's a lot about more the Old Testament world, there are no maps talking about Paul and his missionary journeys. There is also an article I noticed on the long ending of Mark. So here's an article talking about Mark chapter 16 verses 9 through 20, which some people call the longer ending of Mark, and it's just giving a defense of that and why it should be included in the Bible. So that's just an example too, among other things, of the kinds of things you'll see in here. Another article is on the last times, or the end times, and the views of the end times. So really the way I would characterize this Bible is very much giving kind of a more fundamentalist defense of Scripture. So who is this Bible good for? Well, it's good for pastors, people who want to have a good resource on their shelf to understand a fundamentalist perspective. Now, if you're in a fundamental Baptist church, for example, this would be something you'd probably really like. Or if you just want to understand the fundamentalist perspective more, maybe you're not familiar, this would give some good things. And some of the information I totally would like and agree with myself. Maybe some not as much, but I still think it's worth having if you want to understand some of those perspectives. It's also a good Bible for people that are maybe wanting to read the King James and understand the King James better. This would be a good way to be able to read through the King James if you have a hard time understanding it. I hope looking at this Bible has been helpful for you in deciding if it's something that you might want to use. And I'm so glad I had the opportunity to review this. If you have any other questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching this Bible review brought to you from a Frisch perspective.